everyone. Welcome to our first in the spring of our series, Peace in Relationships, because we have more than one, hopefully. My name is Shirin Khosropour. I'm a psychology professor at ACC. I'm also director of the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, and it's the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies that hosts this series along with a bunch of other stuff. As I mentioned earlier, Leila will put the link to our events in the chat box. You can use the link to find all of our other events and join as many as you possibly can. You can also navigate from there to our previously recorded sessions, including several really awesome sessions with today's speaker, Dr. Duana Welch. I won't take up more of your time. I want to get us to hear from Duana as soon as possible. But let me just say, before she tells you more about herself, that Dr. Welch taught at ACC. That's how I was lucky enough to meet her. We were colleagues for a while until she left ACC to pursue other interests. And we have stayed in touch, and we are really lucky to have her back here with us. We started this series, what became a series, right after we went into lockdown in March of 2020. And it's been so popular and successful and useful to me personally as well, that we've made it into a series. So Duana, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Oh, wonderful. Let me get where I can share my screen. Am I allowed to do that? Is that, says host has disabled screen sharing. So if somebody can enable it, I will share my screen.
While Leila's doing that, I'm going to put out a plea to you that if you're in position and willing to share your camera, to turn on your camera, share your lovely faces with us, it would be really nice, particularly for Duana, who's presenting, to be able to look at your sweet faces instead of these rectangles with names in them.
Are you able to share now, Duana, or do I need to make you a co-host? What'd you say?
Now I can share, so I will. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and I'm trying to share and also see the chat at the same time. I'm not sure I see that. How can I see that? Because I want to be able to answer questions as we go along. And so let me see how I can do that. Grid, thumbnail. Okay, well, I don't see them. So I may just ask people to speak because I don't see the chat while I'm sharing this, but our relationships are, in a research sense, they form the backbone of our lives. I am reading a Pulitzer Prize winning biography right now about John Adams, our second American president. There's the chat right there. And the biographer, David McCullough, makes it clear very quickly that the foundation of our nation, in large part, rests on the marriage of John Adams to Abigail Smith, later Abigail Adams, that through the wisdom of his choice of partner, we have a country with, although it is not entirely free, more free than many. And so how do you get to that healthy partnership? You know, David Buss, who wrote The Evolution of Desire, and he's in his 6th or 7th edition of the textbook Evolutionary Psychology. He is the highest regarded evolutionary psychology scientist in the world. He said that that from an evolutionary perspective, there is no more important choice than the choice of mate. And that's almost a direct quote. Whoops. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. Having a hard time making this slide advance without advancing it too far. Okay. All right. There's a big cost of getting it wrong. You know, Adam's got it right. Most people do, actually. The divorce rate since the year 2000 is 1/3, not 1/2. It's looking like 2/3 of people who get married stay married for a lifetime. It's also looking like they're very happy. Most divorces that are ever going to happen in the first, more than half of them happen in the first 7 years. Most of those happen in the first 4 years of the union. So relationships that aren't going to make it usually fail pretty quickly. Not always true, but it's the way to bet, which is what science shows us. It doesn't show us what's going to happen in your life specifically on a given Wednesday, but it does give us a really good indicator of what most people are going to do most of the time and of what your likely outcomes are in a given situation. So we know, for example, that there's a very high cost of getting it wrong. If we marry the wrong person, if we choose somebody who's basically incompatible with us, we know that this has ramifications for everything, really. Our health is worse, we know for a fact. Our sex life is worse, both in quantity and quality. We tend to earn less money, and our children tend to do worse in life. The most unhappy people are the ones who are miserably married. So a lot of people just choose to remain single. You know, they just think, well, it's not worth the risk. But there's also, I would ask you whether you understand what the cost is of not marrying at all, because there's a cost of that. This is kind of like the band Rush said, when you choose to decide, you're still making a choice. There's no sitting this one out. So does anybody have, I'm looking for my 3 new messages here. And thank you all for being here. Woohoo, Rush quote. Does anybody here have any idea of what the pitfalls are of remaining single? People say marriage is hard work. So is being single, actually. There's not a, I'm not going to be able to say, oh, there's a way to live that's completely easy. Why don't you do that? Yeah, loneliness.
Someone,
Yeah, I see the comment. And Sarah Lynn Bowman says loneliness, higher chance of early death. Yes. Men tend to have a higher chance of early death from every known cause every year that they're single. That is single by any means. Single whether they are never married, single whether they are divorced, single whether they are widowed. And living together doesn't give the same benefits as actually being married. There's something about making the commitment that creates a sense of security and an endless time horizon that even if that marriage later ends, while the marriage endures, people have much higher levels of happiness and therefore much higher quality of life in general, not just with their marriage, but in general. Tom W. Smith, who used to be the leader of the NIH, National Institutes of Health, said if we had a product that would make people healthier, happier, richer, and have better sex, and their kids would do better, whoever invented that product would be a billionaire overnight. But the thing is, that product already exists, and it's called marriage. There's no other institution, including living together, that gives people those advantages. So there's a high cost of getting it wrong, but there's a really high upside of getting it right. Unfortunately, people tend to avoid asking the hard questions. So what I mean by that is all of us have deal breakers. All of us have things that we know that if this other person either did do this or didn't have this quality, that the relationship would actually not be workable for us in the long term. But most of us don't ask those questions until the relationship is fairly serious. So I want to ask you, given that the cost of getting it wrong is so high, and it's not just high for you, it's high for society. 15 years ago, the cost to American society for every divorce was greater than $45,000 in terms of lost work and social services. So it's a high cost that affects the entirety of society, which is why I think we all need to have a vested interest in healthy relationships, even if we ourselves don't plan to be in one. It's affecting all of us. Why do you think that people avoid asking the difficult questions, like, here's some examples that I know from my practice. I didn't tell you, by the way, who I am, because I'm just assuming that everybody's seen my former webinars, but I write the Love Factually series of books, and all my work takes social science and applies it to real life relationship issues, helping people to use best practice social and other science, including chemistry and biology and anthropology and sociology and psychology, and to use that information right away, right now, today, for their advantage. And I see clients all over the world helping them apply this science to their lives. I'm not saying this so that you will hire me. I'm saying it so you understand that when I'm talking about this, this is my whole life's work. This is what I do. And so I know for a fact that most people avoid asking difficult questions at the beginning. Questions like, I like where I live and I don't want to move, but you live in another town. How are we going to work this out? Or, my religion's very, very important to me, or my politics are very, very important to me. Do you share those same views, or do you share them to an extent where this relationship is workable? What are your views on pornography? I might have some pretty strong views about that and what I expect in a partner and what's tolerable to me. Am I going to make sure that these align? What are the important things to you? Why do people avoid asking? Because they do. They avoid asking them at the beginning. Why do you think that is?
Maybe they don't want to hear the answer to whatever question that they have that's a problem for them.
Yes, thank you very much for saying that. That's right. A lot of people don't want to hear the answer. I have conversations with clients about this topic all the time. And what I habitually say is a good partner who is worth your life. And that's what you're risking here. We are all gamblers in love. We are all gambling that the way we feel now is the way that we will feel. We're gambling that if I choose you, my life is going to be better on a permanent basis going forward. It's high stakes. But some people view it as a roll of the dice, where it's just, some benevolent love god might or might not give you the partner that you need. And that's the wrong way to think about the gambling that you're doing here. The gambling you're doing here is, given what you know about this person, which should be a lot and should be quick, you should know a lot soon. Given what you know about this person and about your needs, do they have what it takes to make you happy? If the answer is yes, this is not a roll of the dice. This is putting the odds vastly in your favor, which is what I am all about. It's everything I write, it's everything I talk about, and it's everything that I work on clients with, is how do you put the odds in your favor so that when you're gambling, the odds are like 90% or higher in your favor. Some people actually go the other way. They're gambling and they want to tell themselves the odds are 50-50, but the odds are more like 99% that the relationship isn't going to work. And the reason that it's not going to work is there's a deal breaker that they're either keeping themselves unaware of, or which they know about and they're ignoring, because of two things: fun and fear. And the answer that we just heard, and I don't know who said it. I'm sorry that I don't know that. I'd love to give you credit. But the answer that we just heard deals with the aspect of fear. And well, really both of them. I'm having such a good time and I'm afraid that you don't really have the right stuff, but I'm going to hide that from myself so that I don't have to give up the fun and I don't have to be lonely again. Sarah Lynn Bowen has written, they're afraid of destroying the illusion of love. Yes. A lot of us are so lonely, and I use the term us because I take all my own advice. And I have certainly known what loneliness is like, and I've known what it is to find somebody who seems just right and then to have to end that relationship. And it's really hard. And I know that it's painful. And I know it feels risky because most people, when they give up a relationship that was a lot of fun and that met some of their emotional needs, they feel afraid that they're never going to find somebody else, especially people who have an anxious attachment style. And as you know, I've done a webinar on attachment style that I encourage you to watch because that ties into everything. Every webinar I've done, it comes back to attachment style. Sarah Lynn Bowman says, also thinking they can change the person. Yeah, a lot of people do, especially people with two X chromosomes, do tend to believe that we can change the other person. And we can change someone, but it's us. Dr. Kosrapur says, also the sunk cost fallacy, psychological principle that we wanted to follow through because we have invested time or money. That's right. The sunk cost fallacy, notice that the word fallacy is in there, which means it's a mistake. The mistake of thinking that because we've invested so much time or money in a person or a thing or a business or what have you, that we need to keep doing it. The truth is, we call it a fallacy because it's a mistake. When we sink more time and money into someone who can never make us happy, all we're doing is creating more pain for when we eventually get out of the situation. So some relationships, in other words, it's not so much a gamble as a guarantee that they're not going to work. And I really encourage you to find that out as soon as you can. But people do avoid asking for all the reasons that we've named. Most reasons come down to cultural expectations that, you know, early dating is just about fun. See if you get along, see if you fall in love with them. Love is enough. If you fall in love, it'll all work out. Folks, almost everyone in the United States is in love when they marry. If love were enough, if it didn't require anything else, we would not have divorce. There would be virtually no divorce in our country. Obviously, that's not the case. We have about 1/3 of couples married since the year 2000 appear like, you know, they're not going to make it. 2/3 will, 1/3 won't. So, you know, fun at the beginning. When you're looking for a life partner, the reason I started with this slide with no pressure is there is pressure. Don't allow yourself to be carried along on a wave of great sex and good times, because that's not enough to sustain a relationship. Obviously, if you don't have those things at some point in your relationship during the courtship, it would make sense to move forward with it. But if you do have those things and you don't have your needs met, that's going to end. And the longer you have great sex and good times, the more painful the ending will be. Plus, those are years and months and weeks and days that you're not spending with the person that really could make you happy. So people allow cultural messages that this is going to be fun, carry them along. They also allow their own insecurities that they won't ever find anybody this good, or they'll be alone forever, or their low self-esteem to cause them to not look at it too closely because they're afraid they won't get anything else or anything good. Loneliness is a substantial threat. I'm not saying that those fears of loneliness are unfounded. The fears are what they are. I'm saying that research shows that if you use what we know to find a good partner, the odds that you're actually going to be alone and without a good partner are very low. The vast majority of people, if they want to, and if they pursue this in a planned fashion instead of the crapshoot, who knows fashion, they're going to wind up happily partnered for a lifetime. That's what's going to happen. So those fears are largely unfounded. You will be lonely for a little while you look, but not forever. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is how do you assess your needs? Because you can't ask people for what you want if you don't know what you want and need. How to formulate your questions. A lot of people say, okay, you've convinced me. I need to ask for what I need, but I don't know how to do that without driving the other person away. So we're going to talk about exactly how to do that. We're going to do some role play even on that today. When and how do you ask your questions? Exactly. How do you answer your own questions? Because turnabout is fair play. If you ask something, you should expect that the other person may ask you your own question in return. And sometimes some of the questions that are important, you might not love some of your own answers. So we're going to talk about how to deal with that. And then what to do when you find a deal breaker answer. If that happens, what do you do about that? And as you can see, this is interactive. So I know that sometimes people are hesitant to interact, but the more interaction we have, the more value you'll ultimately get from our session today. So what do you need? You cannot get what you need if you don't know what it is. It's amazing to me how many people, and this is cultural messaging from Disney right on down, that love is a thing that happens to you and that you don't really need to know yourself or the other person very well. If you fall in love, that's just going to be what works out. And again, research shows that, apologies to the Beatles, but love is not all you need. You need to have someone where you love them and they love you, for sure. I'm not saying love is not valuable. It's extremely valuable. If you marry without love, men are likely to leave and women are likely to cheat. You need it. It's a must-have that you love each other, but it's not the only one. Other must-haves include this person is kind and respectful, regardless of whether the other person or animal has any power over them, regardless of the kind of day they're having, regardless of their current emotional state. I had to tell somebody recently that I was angry. I didn't berate them and say they were a horrible human being. I said, I felt like I had a right to certain things and they didn't happen. And I'm really angry because that took my agency away. It took my ability to make a good decision away. And I feel like, that was really unfair and I'm mad about it and I want to talk about it. Notice that's completely respectful. I'm not denigrating who this person is at all. I'm not saying you're looking for someone who's never angry. I'm saying you have to have somebody who, when they are, can express that in a way that doesn't denigrate your or anybody else's humanity. You can't get kindness and respect if you don't understand what those things are and that they are must-have. I will tell you this, if you get someone who their default way of living their life is to be kind and respectful when things aren't going their way, you will not be abused. By definition, these people do not abuse other people. It is a huge safeguard for you and your children if you have children, whether you have them now or whether you have children in the future. So becoming educated about what kindness and respect really are, which is part of what I do in my writing, and adhering to that standard and not making excuses for people who aren't kind and respectful. This is something that comes up, I believe, in every webinar that I've done, because it is a core concept that cannot be glossed over. Other must-haves. Yeah, you need love, you need kindness and respect regardless of other circumstances. The first time somebody shows you that they disregard the basic worth and dignity and humanity of anyone else, not just you, anyone, it's time to leave. That never gets better. I've never talked to the person who said, yeah, one time I dated somebody and they did that and then that got way better. I've never seen it. And I've been doing this a long time, people, decades. I've been doing this for 27 years now. So never is a long time. I haven't seen it yet. Okay, so there's love, there's kindness and respect. And then another thing that's really important is someone who shares your values. Values are things that you really, really care about. So for example, a lot of people, that's going to include as somebody wrote to me, politics are the new religion. A lot of people, this is going to include politics. Studies over the past couple decades show that increasingly people will not date outside of their political party or political ideals, because a lot of those ideals really aren't about the law so much as they're about your concept of what morality means. I don't need to advance the slide yet. We're still on what do you need? I'm just telling you some of the things you definitely do need. Make sure that if you really care about religion, that you go ahead and put that and be specific. Do they need to be the same religion, or do they need to just not make fun of your religion? Do they need to show up with you on high holy days, but no other times? Is it enough if they're merely accepting of your religion? Or do you need them to go with you, go every week, pray with you? Do you need all of that? A huge part of getting what you need is knowing yourself. So now that I've told you some of the things you definitely are going to have on that list, I want to tell you exactly how to make that list. First of all, I want you to brainstorm everything you can think of that you might even want. Not all of those are going to be needs, but I want you to think about this in a very detailed way for reasons that I've gone into in earlier webinars, such as sometimes people actually already know this person, they just didn't realize they knew this person. You're going to start recognizing people in your environment who satisfy your list if you know what would be on the list. So brainstorm everything. And one way to brainstorm is to think about the relationships you had that, or even those you observed where there were things where you thought, I'm not doing that, and put that on there. Like, I'm not going to be with somebody who, doesn't share my sexual orientation. Because some people, think that they can overcome that. And then they find out later, no, can't do that. Got to be with somebody who has the same sexual orientation I have. Or I'm not going to be with somebody who hates my mom. So write down everything you can think of, and in any language you choose to use, with any frame of reference. Could be other people's relationships, could be yours, could be, movies you've seen, anything. Then the second step is put it all in positive language. So I'm not going to be with someone who hates my mother, I'm going to be with somebody who accepts my mother, or ideally likes her. Use positive language of what you do want. If you've seen my early webinars, you know that I've been with a couple people who had serious problems with addiction, but my list did not and does not say isn't an addict or isn't addicted to anything. It says abstains from all drug use and drinks 5 or fewer drinks per year. That's what I do want, not what I don't want. Be very specific. You notice how specific that example was. That's what we in psychology call operationalizing your variables. You're defining how you see this concept. You're not just saying this person has integrity. You're saying this person has integrity. They do what they say they will do when they say they will do it. They are honest about everything about their life as we get to know each other, and it makes sense for them to reveal things. And they try to behave in such a way that they affirm other people's basic worth and dignity. They are polite to their mother. They are polite to the wait staff. I'm giving details here. That's what I want. My own list has 10 must-haves, but each must-have has a paragraph under it, and every sentence of each paragraph is a must-have. It's detailed. Okay, but you're saying what you do want, because if I say, don't think about the brown bear, everybody's thinking about the brown bear. Your brain doesn't process don't. You have to tell it what you do want. It's going to look for whatever you say. So say what you want. Then put it into categories, must have versus want. How do you tell whether something's a must have? This is probably the biggest sticking point most people have. They want to put the wants into must have. They want to put the must haves into wants. So here's how you tell the difference. If this aspect is so important to you that if this person was perfect, I mean, they had absolutely everything on your list except for this one thing. If that would be a deal breaker, it's a must have. That's a high bar. Think about it. If the person were absolutely perfect, they had everything you wanted and everything you needed, but not this one thing. If that's a deal breaker for you, then that one thing is a must have. Here's the mistake I see people make. They'll put something under must have that's not must have. And later on, when I hold their feet to the fire and say, you said this was must have, they say, well, must haves are must haves. You need to define them, and you need to be ruthlessly honest with yourself about what they are. So 80% of women around the world, including in the classes I taught, say that they must have a partner, especially if these women are heterosexual. They must have a partner who's 6 feet tall or taller. Folks, the average height in the United States for men is 5'9". So, most of you aren't ever partnering permanently if that's really a must-have for you. If this person were otherwise perfect, according to your own standards, would you really kick them to the curb because they were 5'9"? I encourage you to examine why you would think that and to put that in the wants list, even if it's a really strong want. You know what? George Clooney is not 6 feet tall. You tell me you kick that guy to the curb? Really? Okay. So be very honest with yourself about what's a want, even if it's a really strong one, even if you think, oh, but okay, it's still a want. If this person were otherwise perfect, here's what people think. They think when I ask them to put it under wants that I'm saying this is disposable and you should just give up on it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you may very well meet somebody who's 6 feet tall or taller. That may very well happen. Putting it under wants is not giving up on the idea. It's saying, I'm not kicking people to the curb just because of this thing. I'm going to look at the overall pattern of wants and see if it's enough for me. I'm not saying you only get your must-haves and none of your wants. I'm saying that you wind up with somebody who you feel really great about because they have enough of what you want to satisfy you, and they have every single one of your must-haves. Okay, so we're going to talk about when you should ask and how you should ask in a minute, and how you know that it's something to ask. But we're going to start by saying it's really important to ask really quickly. If you know that something is must-have, I'm going to show you how to formulate your questions. I'm going to show you how to use that list to make sure that you ask every question. But I want to start with this concept because so many people rebel against it. Their gut recoils against this. You should ask as soon as possible. You should ask on the app before you meet, before you even talk on the phone. You should ask on the phone, not by text. You should ask in person. You should ask a question that maps back onto must-haves every time you meet, every time. And earlier is better, as long as you're kind and respectful in how you ask, and as long as you are clear in your wording, and that the wording is appropriate to how well you know the person. That's kind of a nebulous statement. We are going to get into the nitty-gritty of how you do this. But I just want you to know for now, you should ask right away. And I'm never going to ask you to do a single thing that I don't do myself. I do all of this. I am with a terrific person that I've been with for a year now. It's very, very serious at this point. And I did all of this, and I did it online with my ad. Actually, I met him online. My ad was a weed out process. I described who I wanted in positive, fun language. And then anybody who didn't answer the ad in detail, I didn't even respond. If they answered in detail, in case you think, well, that wouldn't work for me, folks, I'm 50. I was 52 when I did that. That's not a time most people would consider rife with, wonderful available men. You need to have high standards. Research shows that if you have high standards when you date, you're much more likely to be happy when you're married. Have high standards right now, and have the courage. And courage is action in the presence of fear. It's not action just without fear. It's action in the presence of fear. Have courage to get what you want and what you need. So, ask right away. Again, we're about to cover how. But why? Because you don't need more pain in your life. I know people commonly view their breakups as learning experiences. How many of those learning experiences do you want? Having a successful relationship is also a learning experience, but it's a learning experience where you get to be happy. That's what I really want for you, is to have learning experiences where you get to learn and you get to be happy instead of being repeatedly miserable. Heartbreak, there's a real thing called broken heart syndrome where people actually die of it. We talk a lot about physically safe sex, but we don't talk nearly enough about emotionally safe sex, emotionally safe relationships that are going to nurture and sustain your life. And that's what I want for you, relationships that are going to make your life immensely better, not just a little bit, immensely in every regard. Your life should get better. Sexually, it should get better. Physically, you should be healthier as a result of that relationship because you feel good and that helps your immune system to function. There's just been a study released that shows that people who get COVID, which I have right now, I'm triple vaxxed, I don't have it very badly, but I have it right now. People who are happy in their partnership and happy overall, people who have low stress, they are having fewer symptoms and having an easier time of it than people who have a lot of stress and poor relationships. Your relationship should make your life better in your health, in your wealth, in your happiness, in your sexuality, in how your kids do, whether or not this person is their parent, in every regard, other than how good. The only exception, as a sociologist, Dr. Linda J. Waite says, is how good looking you are. Won't fix that. We'll fix just about everything else. Immensely helpful. So the stakes are high. You should ask soon. You don't need heartbreak. Find out right away. So how do you form your questions? First of all, use your list. That list is foundational. It will guide your search. It will help you to eliminate people who aren't appropriate for you, because let's face it, every minute you spend with somebody, especially being devoted to somebody who is not appropriate for you, is a minute that by definition you are not with somebody who is. It's not like, oh, it was just a learning experience that didn't cost me anything. It is costly. So determine that you're going to do everything you can in your power. Look, there are no guarantees, but you can hedge the odds in your favor. And that list is really necessary for each item of your list. And this is why I have asked you to be so detailed. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sarah Lynn Bowman says, my partner and I grieve all the time. We have lost in bad relationships that we could have been together. Oh, same. Same. Like I have a direct message somewhere here. Oh, I can't see it. Nope, can't see it. Sorry about that. My partner and I say the same thing all the time. We wish we'd met so long ago, but we were too busy being in unworkable relationships to be together. And, that's not a low cost thing. I mean, he's 60 and I'm 53. That's a lot of years to not be with each other. Very happy it's working out now, but that's a lot of years. I really want you to get something that I didn't get. I'm passionate about my work because most people who interact with my information are younger than I am. And the younger you are, the more years you have to take advantage of everything that's on offer. And, if you are my age or older, the rest of your life is however long it's going to be, may as well be really happy. And you have a lot of say in that. You have a lot of control over that by being picky, by really knowing yourself and knowing what you have to have. And then for each item being so specific that you can formulate a question about it, or you can look at a behavior that would tell you whether they have this thing. A lot of times it's both. You can ask questions and you can assess behavior. There is a problem with asking questions for some of your items. Like if I say, so do you think you're kind and respectful? Everyone's going to say yes. You can't assess that one with a question. And the reason is the self-serving bias. People are aware that those are highly desirable qualities. The self-serving bias is the tendency to perceive ourselves favorably. And because we have that strong tendency, and this is worldwide, by the way, there's been research done in many, many countries and cultures on self-serving bias. It exists everywhere. It's been studied. And the result of wanting to perceive ourselves favorably is that if something is subjective, like how kind and respectful somebody is, there's not a definition of that that's just hard and fast. If something's subjective and it's desirable, that other people want this, people are going to say they have it. 90% of drivers believe that they are better drivers than 90% of drivers. That's just an example. So everyone's going to say, yes, I'm kind and respectful. So you can't ask that one. So there are some areas where you can ask a question and there are others that you can't. So I would like to do some examples right now to figure out where you think and then we're going to use these examples for how to formulate the actual words. Can you ask somebody, do you think, about whether they share the same values around money that you do? By the way, since money is one of the top 3 things that couples fight about, and those fights can be very contentious, it is important to know whether you see money the same way. So, Sarah Lynn Bowman says, this is where I get tripped up about values. Shared values are important, but how we define those things, behave in accordance with them can be totally different. Exactly, which is why I'm going to talk about specifically how do you formulate your questions. You can ask questions about money. You can, and you can ask them fairly or early on. It's going to be important how you do that, and it's going to be important to know yourself well enough to know exactly what your values are around that. Attachment style. Got a whole webinar about that. Can you ask someone what their attachment style is? You can, but it's actually better to take Levine's attachment style test online. And I know in another webinar, there's a link to that. You could also Google Levine, Levine, plus attachment style quiz, and you'll get right to it. It has your attachment style quiz, but it's also got deciphering my partner's attachment style. Don't give your partner the quiz. They will have the self-serving bias. They will figure out how to answer the questions. You take the quiz by looking at their behavior. That's what the quiz about your partner does. It asks about their behaviors and it gives you an answer based on that. So there are some areas where, when I was online, I said I was looking for someone with a secure attachment style. And I did that knowing that everyone was going to say they were secure, and everyone did, but only one person was. So you have to assess some things behaviorally. Religion. You can ask questions about religion. You can observe people's behavior. Do they say they go every week, but then you can see through their behavior that they don't? Layla has just posted the attachment style quiz for those of you who want to take advantage of that. I really encourage you to, if you're looking for a partner, I encourage you to put it in your taskbar where you can take it every time you're dating somebody new. Or as you go through your relationship, you're going to pick up new information and you can take it again. You can ask people questions about their political beliefs. Don't just say, what political party do you belong to? You can ask litmus test questions about, how they view specific issues that are important to you. You can ask their relationship history. And you can't ask about kindness and respect, but you can discern kindness and respect from how they answer a lot of these questions, especially relationship history. How they talk about a former partner is how they're going to talk about you someday. They won't necessarily say the exact same things, but the tone that they use when they talk about someone who has disappointed them, you're not going to be perfect forever, neither are they. There are going to be points of contention. How do you want this person to think and talk about you? You're getting a chance to hear that when you learn how they talk about their relationship history, which is another big reason to ask about it very early on. Geography, you can ask somebody questions about where they live and where they want to live. So there's a lot more, and I encourage you to give me examples when we come to the questions that we're actually going to wind up asking. So how do you word it? Okay. When you first meet someone, you need to keep the wording hypothetical. Let's say that one of your core values, and I really think this belongs on your must-haves if it's important to you, must want to get married. If that's where you're at, or must not want to get married, must be good with living together permanently. Whatever your truth is on this, having the same foundation for the basis of your relationship is immensely important. And I encourage that to be a must-have. If you know you want to be married and this other person knows that they want to cohabit forever, that's a non-starter. I wouldn't say despite getting along, I would say because you're getting along so well. The more you like this person, the greater the heartbreak's going to be later on. If you ignore this and just go forward with the relationship anyway. People usually don't change on that. So, again, do you want to be the person who's 53 or 60 and just now finding the right person? Be picky from the outset about the things that really matter, but keep it hypothetical. If I said to my partner, so you want to get married someday? Well, it sounds like I just proposed and I'm on the first phone call. I sound like I have no boundaries. I have no social intelligence. And I sound like the kind of person that he should put on his track shoes and run away as fast as possible. But I can still ask the question. Here's how I can ask it. And I did. And this one I asked on the first date. I didn't ask on a phone call. You and I are just now getting to know each other. And I have no idea whether this is going to wind up working out between the two of us, but I think it just doesn't make a lot of sense to get very deep into something where it's just, we see life extremely differently. So I know that I want a fully committed relationship, and I know that I would never live with anybody without marriage. I just wouldn't do it. It's not something that appeals to me. And so I'm wondering, what do you think about that? Where, what is it that you're ultimately looking for from the right relationship? Again, not saying it's going to be me. I want to know your general views. I never, ever had anybody who left me over that line of thinking or questioning. Because at this point, you don't know each other. It's not personal. It's hypothetical. It's allowing you to suss out the important things. So let's practice some of these other issues. Finances. Can you think of a specific thing that's really important to you about money that you would want to know, but you'd be afraid to ask? This is a really hard one, but it's a really important one. Did you know 40% of people get married without having ever discussed finances? Folks, that is, to use a scientific term, cray cray. Like, don't do that. This is probably a big reason why people have huge fights about this later, because they didn't know whether they were on the same page about their values about money going in. So nope, okay. So there's lol, but nobody's actually answering this. I'll give you a common example. A really common example is a lot of people are very debt averse. They don't want to take on a new partner's debts. They don't want to be with somebody who takes on debt that they can't pay back. A lot of people feel this way, including people who have debt. So if you feel that way, you can say fairly soon, I know this is a really uncomfortable concept, and it sends a lot of people running for the hills, but money is something that people fight about a lot. And I really don't want to fight with whoever I wind up with about money. I really don't want that to be a big source of contention. So I'm wondering, even though we're just getting to know each other, I'm wondering, what do you think about debt? What's your philosophy on that? And listen to what they say. Listen very carefully. Do they say, well, I think you can always make more money and there's no problem with amassing debt as long as you can pay it off later? And that might be fine with you. Or you may be a person who has really high needs for a sense of safety around this, so that debt feels scary to you. And you're not okay with it at all. I've talked to people who they won't even accept debt on student loans, houses, cars. Most people would accept that debt. They'd have a hard time with other forms of debt. You need to know what your truth is. Notice how much of this is knowing who you are. You need to know what your truth is about this. And then you need to make sure that if this is a must-have, you're asking questions about it. There are some people who know that, men or women who know that when they have children, they want to be the person who is financially supported while bringing those children up. In which case, money is very important. In which case, you're going to have to know, does this person either have the funds or the earning potential to make that happen? In which case, you're probably not going to say, so are you rich? But you are going to look at things like, what kind of job do they have? Do they carry debt? How much? It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. How much of their paycheck do they keep? Ask about their philosophy on save versus spend. Don't act like something isn't important that actually is a foundation of most people's everyday life. And don't let people call you a gold digger either. You're a gold digger if this is the only important thing, but if it's an important thing, it is an important thing. It's an important thing everywhere in the world. Read any novel by Jane Austen. Those novels are mostly about money. They're as much about money as they are about love. Men really value youth and beauty. Gay men, straight men, bisexual men, trans men, they value youth and beauty. Women really value provision and protection, which means they value resources and the commitment that would provide those resources over time. When we live in a world where men will take just anyone and not care about their beauty and youth, I will be happy to tell women not to care about resources, but we don't live in that world yet. So make sure you ask the questions. Other question, geography. A lot of people get into long distance relationships, especially people who they meet online. Ask the hard question. I know people who have had long distance relationships for 5 years that ended because they never really had the conversation early on about who would be moving. And it wasn't workable for anyone to move. They could have known that from the first discussion. I've known people, and by the way, there's research on long distance relationships. And let me just summarize. It works okay if you have an end date that's within about a year to a year and a half. Otherwise, they don't work. They just don't. It's not a total guarantee, but it's certainly not the way to bet. So I want you to know what I said to my partner on our first phone call. So you know that I really do this myself. Look, the first phone call is a great time to do this because you don't really like this person that much yet. You're not heavily invested yet. The stakes are really low. Don't do it when you're together a year and the stakes are super high and you think you can't live without this person. That really hurts. Do it immediately. So what I said was, you live in Portland and I live in Eugene, and that's a couple hours apart. And, I'm willing to do a long distance relationship if this works out, but I'm only willing to do it for a year to a year and a half. That's it. Like, if we decide to date, the clock is always running. And that's just reality for me. So, if you decide to call me again, which I hope you do, I really like you, but if you decide to call me again, I want you to do it with that in mind, because I'm not going to do a long distance relationship for very long. And I really like where I live. I could live anywhere, but I really don't want to. I chose Eugene and I want to be here for the just right relationship. I would move, but I really don't want to. Are you at all open? If we worked out, I understand we just are on our first phone call, we might not. But I don't see any point in getting in deep if there's no flexibility. So I would really like to hear your completely frank view on that. And, obviously the answer was something that I liked, or we wouldn't have had a second phone call. The stakes were really low. If you have the view that that love is rare and there's only one love of your life, there's only one person in this whole world that you can love, then you're not going to have the fortitude it takes to ask these questions, because you're going to feel like you're scaring off the person, the one, and that love is enough. So you don't need to ask these questions. There are a lot of people in this big world that we could love, who could love us back, who could be right for us. After you get deeply involved, it will feel like this is the only person that it could have been. It will feel like that. It won't be true. I want you to have that feeling, but I want you to know at this point, if you ask questions that are hypothetical, but that tap directly into what you must have at the outset, you will jettison people who it would not have worked with. And that's good. That leaves you free and available to find someone where it really could work. You're not eliminating the love of your life asking this way. You are if you say, hey, want to move to Eugene? Then you are getting rid of the person. Other things that people need to ask questions about. I'm going to ask you, how would you, Sarah Lynn Bowen says, I feel like for a lot of people asking these questions are tantamount to, am I worthy of you potentially giving something up for me? And people are afraid of the answer to that. Yeah, they are afraid of the answer to whether this other person basically finds them worthwhile. That is a therapy issue. If you feel like you basically aren't worthy, keep in mind, I'm asking you to ask this question at a point in time when it doesn't matter if they think you're worthy. You don't even know each other yet. If when the stakes are low, this still feels really high stakes, that is a therapy issue. And I encourage you to go to therapy with someone who understands attachment style and self-esteem. And I say this as a person who goes to therapy every week. I am not asking you to do anything that I don't do myself, any of it. It's necessary for you to ask these questions, and it's necessary for you to do it quickly. And doing that is going to involve either faking it till you make it. It's going to feel terrifying to do it if you never have. And or going to therapy so that you feel better about it. I actually reached a point where it was like, Wonder Woman with the they call those bracelets that she wore. She's up out of the trenches and bullets are coming and she's just deflecting them. I just was like, I'll ask the questions, and if it deflects somebody, I don't care. Can you share therapists with your partner, or are you asking me to share who I see? Oh, who I see. I see somebody in Eugene, Oregon, so it won't be relevant to our discussion. Otherwise, I'd be happy to. I will tell you how to find a good therapist. I'm going to tell you right now. Go on Psychology Today, click Find a Therapist, then decide what your search terms are. They will let you search by how far away they are, what gender the therapist is, what insurance they take, whether they take sliding scale depending on your income, what the issues are that you want to work on, and even the kind of therapy that the person is versed in. Use all your searches, and you're welcome. Use all those searches, and then, even then, I do this for clients all the time. I find them therapists. Even then, you're not done. What you do then is, out of that select group of people, you start making phone calls. Look, Psychology Today says to email them. If you email them, I mean, it's not a bad plan. You can create a formulated email that should say, hi, whatever their name is, my name is, and I'm calling because, or I'm writing because I'm looking for a therapist who can help me with low self-worth and an anxious attachment style. This is an example. Whatever it is the issue is. I see that this is something you work with and that you take my insurance, or that you have sliding scale or whatever. I am interested in talking with you for a few minutes on the phone to see whether there's rapport. Here's my number, and I hope you'll call me at your soonest convenience. Sincerely, your name. Since this webinar is going to be recorded, or is being recorded, if you want to like just use that entire speech, you can just stop and start and copy it and move forward with that. The people who are responsive, you don't want to consider anybody who it takes them like 2 weeks to get back with you. They're either too busy or they don't care. So you're looking for someone who's responsive. But the big thing you're really looking for is, are they not only responsive, but do you feel a connection when you talk to them? In experiments, if you randomly assign people to either talk to a licensed therapist or a janitor who's been taught some basic ways to listen compassionately, clinically depressed people have the same outcomes, whether they're seeing a licensed practitioner or the janitor who had minimal training in how to listen compassionately. The main thing you need is rapport. You've already screened for all these other things. So now you're looking at rapport. So if somebody says, well, I really don't do phone calls first, next, don't accept that. So you're going to take the person who you feel a connection with, who matches your criteria. And if that person, if you have a couple meetings with them and you feel like, oh, I thought we had a connection, but we don't, or they don't communicate in a way that I can identify with them, find somebody else. Okay, so let's practice on a couple more things. Can you ask about religion right up front? And if so, what question do you think you would ask? I'm going to be silent for a moment and give you time to think about it or to respond, either one. Can you handle being with a priestess? That's very funny. But that's actually, humor is a great way to introduce serious conversations. So, can you handle being with a priestess? They're going to laugh, you're going to laugh, and you can then say, in all seriousness, I'm going to use what I would say. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and I go to services every week when, before pandemic I did. And the community is really important to me. It's not terribly important to me that you be a Unitarian or that you go every week, but it is important to me that I'm with somebody who, can respect that those are my values and that's my community, and who wouldn't mind, having dinner with my friends from that community, or having close friends who are from that community. You know, you don't need to share my value, my religion at all. In fact, my religion doesn't care whether you believe in God. True thing. So, but I do need to know that you could accept it and accept some of these people into your life. So how, you know, if we worked out, how would you feel about that? Notice that it's still hypothetical. I'm stating what my values are. You could be more simple about it. You can say, I noticed that you said online that you're Catholic, or I noticed you said online that you're atheist. How important is that to you, and how do you define it? How does it shape your life? You can ask just a general question. That priestess could also be a serious question about religion. It was. I tend to date atheists, so it's actually important they don't put down spirituality. Yeah, exactly. Same here. And, you know, it's what you're looking for is someone who meets your definition of how many of your values and views they have to share and at what level. Notice that I don't need somebody who is a Unitarian Universalist. I need somebody who doesn't denigrate my value system and my spirituality. I would love it if they participate, but if they don't, not a deal breaker. Notice again, how much of this is knowing yourself and then formulating the question based on that self-knowledge. Okay, politics, you can ask about specific issues. You can ask about politics generally. I'm just going to give you an example. And I have permission. I don't have permission from all my clients to use examples from them, but I have full permission for myself, which is why I'm giving a lot of examples that are from my own life. When I was online a little over a year ago, I met a guy who was just fantastic on pixels. And I noticed that he said, on the political question, he said that he was middle of the road. And so I said to him on the phone call, you know, we're really getting along so well. We have so much in common. So you know what that means? That means I have to look for differences. LOL, we were laughing. I said, so I noticed that online you said that you're middle of the road when it comes to politics. I'm very liberal. And so I'm wondering, what's an area where you think that you're middle of the road and you think somebody very liberal might have a different point of view? And what he said was, well, I carry a gun with me everywhere I go. Now, we're going to get back to what I did with that information when we talk about what if you find a deal breaker. We're going to talk about exactly how to deal with that. I am not with him. I was really glad I asked the question, and I was really happy that I asked it when it was very low stakes, even though I was super excited about him. He's a great guy. I'm really happy that I asked that question when it was really low stakes. Other ways to ask are, you know, what are your political views? Can you tell me about your political values? Can you tell me an area where we might not agree? Can you tell me how you came to that conclusion? There are lots of different ways you can ask, all of them hypothetical. None of them involve asking this person to marry you. They just involve asking, basically, if this worked out, what would it look like? What are your views? What are your values? Okay. Oh, I went one too far, I think. Wording your questions. Oh, okay. Maybe I didn't. Maybe it is the very next one. Answering questions. Okay. One of the questions I encourage absolutely everyone to ask is, if your ex were here right now, what would they say was the reason for your breakup? I encourage you to write that down and ask absolutely everyone you go out with. Here's why. The question, if your ex were here right now, what would they say was the reason for your breakup? There's a lot in that question. First of all, people tend to tell the truth in a way that they don't if you just ask them what their relationship was like. For some reason, they tend to tell the truth when it's from a third-party perspective. There's less self-serving bias involved. Another reason to ask the question is it not only gives you a much clearer window into who you're talking to from the answer standpoint, but the way they answer is very important. If the answer is something like, well, she would say that sexually we were just really incompatible. I wanted sex like 5 times a week, and she only wanted sex 1 time a week. In fact, sometimes not that often. And she felt like I was just constantly pestering her for it. And ultimately, we just weren't compatible enough for that to work out. And she broke up with me. But the truth is, it should have been mutual. That wasn't workable, no matter how much I wanted it to work out. That answer shows you that this is a kind and respectful person. He's not saying she was cold, or she was a prude, or she was frigid. He's not calling her any names in this answer. He's not making a judgment call about who she is as a human being. He's not making her wrong even. He's pointing out there was a deal-breaking mismatch and that this is what she would point to. And he's telling that in a kind, respectful way. So any question you ask, turnabout is fair play. If you ask, you don't have to volunteer an answer, but if they say, what about you? Which they probably will, if they have any social skills at all, they're not just going to treat this as a monologue. They're going to ask, well, what about your relationships? You need to give the level of detail appropriate for how well you know this person. There are numerous reasons I'm asking you to ask these questions up front. One of these is because you need to find deal breakers quickly, but another of these is you need to see whether this person shows that they are not secure enough to form a good relationship. If you don't have a secure attachment style, you need someone who does. If you have a secure attachment style, research shows that you could be with somebody anxious pretty well, you could be with somebody secure, no problem, but you still are going to want to know. Attachment style is so foundational to how people do everything in a relationship, everything. I recently found out that attachment style is a foundation of how good people feel about themselves being seen naked by their partner. I mean, it affects everything. There'll be an area where I think, oh, not that. And then I'll see a study and it'll be, oh, that too. Turns out anxious attachers feel much less comfortable being viewed naked. They feel like there's something wrong with them. And secure attachers who maybe even aren't all that good looking are like, yeah, this is me. They don't have a big problem with it. Both my breasts are gone. Here you go. There are the scars. There are the tattoos I got to cover the scars. They're okay with themselves. And which is, of course, where all of us would like to get, I think. But they're already there. So one reason that I want you to ask these questions is so that you can find out what somebody's attachment style is, so you can see if it's compatible with your own. And one of the signs is when you ask a question, what level of detail do they give you? I want you to answer the questions the same way a secure person would, whether or not you yourself are secure, because the way they do this, it's better at establishing a healthy bond. I want you to fake it till you make it on the secure thing. So that means giving the level of detail appropriate for how well you really know this person, not the level of detail for how much you want to jump their bones, not the level of detail for how attracted you are to them, which is related, obviously, to how much you want to jump their bones, not the level of detail that is appropriate for how lonely you are and how much you want a relationship right now. I want you to give the level of detail appropriate for how well you actually know this person. Secure people do this. When you talk to a secure person, this is why a lot of non-secure people think secure people are boring. They don't get it. That no, secure people are doing things at a pace that works for developing a lifelong relationship. They're not boring. They're giving you, I often hear, yeah, but this person was boring because they don't say these exact words. They didn't give me their life story on the first date or the first phone call. No, they shouldn't. They don't know you that well. It's not appropriate. What they're going to do if they're secure is they're going to tell you something true, but not the whole truth. And it's like an onion. the skin of the onion is a true thing about the onion. The onion isn't faking it. This is a true thing about the onion. And when you cut into the onion and you look 3 layers in, that's also a true thing about the onion. And then there's a level that's in the very, very center of the onion. That's the deepest part of the onion that is also true about the onion. None of these are lies, but you don't give somebody the entire view on the first date or the first month or the first 2 months or the first 3 months. You give the level of detail appropriate for the actual level of knowledge of this person. So, example, if somebody says to me, why didn't your marriage to Vic work out? You wrote books where you said wonderful things about him. A secure answer to that would be, everything I wrote in those books was correct. And unfortunately, then 7 years into our marriage, he started drinking. And that was a deal breaker for me. That's a true answer. Is it the entire story about the years that I spent trying to see if this could? No, those are levels of answer for down the road. Do you see what I'm saying here? You're not lying ever, but you aren't giving the entire story. Yes, Shireen.
So this brings me to something that I have experienced anyway, and others may have also. Because you're expected to not only give this kind of skin of the onion answer, but also receive it, presumably. There is so much that is left unsaid that, so the person, like in my experience, the person gave me that outside and very glossy answer that was a very, very intelligent person too, and knew all of these, these things. But then when we got to know each other better, then all of the really nasty stuff about the ex started coming out. And so if I had known those things, if I had heard that early before, before the relationship continued, it would have been so much easier to say, ooh, this is not the kind of person I want to be with. So do you ever dig in, like to say, well, tell me more?
Yes, and there is no way of dating that will immediately eliminate inappropriate partners. That's something that everyone would like, interrogation. That's something everyone would like, is how do I ask the question where, I can find out if somebody's totally wrong for me. As you know, from another webinar that I did, when I talked in depth about kindness and respect, because we covered that in detail in a different webinar. I had met somebody before my partner. I didn't meet him online. I met him accidentally at the local park, and it was COVID. There were no vaccines yet. I had open heart surgery a long time ago, and we didn't know what it would do to me if I got it, and there was no vaccine. And my son was living with me. He's got some health issues. So I was being super careful. I was living as if under quarantine almost all the time. I would go outside, but I would stay 6 feet away from everybody, including this guy. So we'd go walking every day. And eventually he asked me to be his girlfriend. And everything I'd seen up till then was really a green light. And as soon as I said yes to being his girlfriend, and we still hadn't touched because we were going to have to quarantine, like he hadn't been quarantining. He was going to have to do that for 2 weeks before we could be within 6 feet of each other. So he did some things that avoidant attachers do. And of course, I know what those things are. And so I decided, instead of making a cut and dried decision, I would say very kindly, it seems like maybe we did the girlfriend thing a little bit quickly. I noticed that since you've asked me to be exclusive with you, obviously with the understanding that, if the physical side just isn't there, we'll break up. But since you've asked me that, it seems like you've pulled back actually a little bit in the relationship, instead of escalating it, like, going to the park this evening with your dog and not telling me you'd even been there until after you got home, even though the park is 1 street over from my house. And he didn't just get defensive, he started calling me names. And I have never spoken with him again. I emailed him and said, you know, it was all off. It went beyond that, but it was very ugly, not from me. I actually tried to save it a little bit. I knew that I wasn't going to keep dating him, but I tried to at least make it friendly. I said, you know, sounds like we're both focusing a lot on my failings, and I would really like to kind of repair the situation and understand that I'm on your team. I'm not trying to say you're a bad guy here. And that he just doubled down and in a really mean tone of voice said, well, I get to have my say. And I said, you know what? You certainly do. And at that moment, I thought, you get to have your say for 3 more minutes and then I'm hanging up and we're never talking again, which is what I did. Thank you. Sarah says she's so sorry that happened to me. You know what? Here's the distinction. Most people would have given that guy a pass. They would have said, oh, he was just having a bad day, or he was surprised that I questioned him that way or something. I have never seen that get better. I don't regret that I cut it off. I actually know his ex-wife, and she burst into tears when I told her, because apparently he talked to her like that for 10 years. When you see that, you are seeing the truth. So I ended it. But the point I'm really making is I had known him for, I don't know, 6 weeks by then. We had shared a lot of things. And only then did it come up that when things aren't going well, he is not kind or respectful. You can't know everything the first meeting. You might get a little bit attached. You might get a lot attached. The point is to ask, the point is not that you're going to know everything. The point is don't hide from knowing things. But there's no way to date that that will save you from getting somewhat invested in someone that turns out to be wrong later. On the other hand, if you have these standards and you ask these questions, it should save you a lot of time. Not all the time, but a lot of it. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, Nina says, first sign of disrespect, goodbye. I'm telling you what, it's easy to say when you're not in the situation. It's hard to do. It was hard for me to do, and I've had this job for a long time. So I do feel compassion when it's hard for people to do, but it is necessary. So going back to the onion example, you're looking for someone who gives you a true answer at first, and then as you know them a little bit better, they give you more details. Don't interrogate them, but do ask. Like maybe the next time you talk, say, you know, when you said that you know, you were so different in terms of your sexual needs, you know, is that something you had known for a long time? Maybe even before you got married? Is it something that kind of was gradual awareness? You're not really asking this question because you want to know the answer so much. You're asking this question because you want to see, do they give you a deeper level of knowledge, or are they just going to shut up and not tell you anything else? Because that's not acceptable. You're actually getting to know this person, and the onion, they do need to come in on the level of the onion. As you're getting to know them better, you should be getting more and more toward the center of that onion. So you're looking for, is there a little bit more detail? Or do they just clam up? Because that's avoidant, and who needs that? We don't need that. You need somebody who's going to give you genuine intimacy. If you're avoidant people want genuine intimacy too. They just don't know how to do it. They need somebody secure who can lead them. You're looking for someone secure who can lead you. Because leadership like that works. A lot of people get what's called earned security by choosing somebody who's capable of doing this. So you look for, do they do this in a way that a secure partner would do it? If you're not secure, do it that way, and it will become your truth. You can act yourself into a way of being. And you can prepare with role play. So we're going to do some role play right now. I'm not going to put you on the spot to do the role play. I'm going to put me on the spot because I've got a lot of practice with this. I want you to toss out the hardest question you can think of and see if I can give an answer that is true without being overly intimate. What's something that you've been afraid to ask somebody, but it's important to you? I'm going to start, and then I want y'all to be thinking of your answers. Here's something that's super important. A lot of women get really put off, especially women at like 40 and beyond, get really put off by men asking sexual questions. I want to tell you something about that. Number one, there's a hefty number of women over the age of 50, especially, who don't care about sex, and men still do. And so they need to ask. If I have a male client, I say, go ahead and ask. That is not inappropriate of them to do. Now, it's inappropriate to send a dick pic. It's inappropriate to say nice tits. Here's what's not inappropriate. You know, in some past relationships, I found that my desire for sexual activity is higher than my partner's. And, you know, it's fairly important to me. I'm not saying that we would work out, but it is an important area of life. I'm wondering, you know, in your ideal relationship, how much sexual activity is ideal for you? If they won't answer that, walk away. What research shows is people who are capable of having a healthy, happy relationship, the people who wind up having the best sex are the ones who will talk about it. I'm not saying in a pornographic way. I'm saying in a way that's truthful without being too intimate right at first. So the question that that person could ask is like I just phrased. And my answer to that, if I were, you know, this hypothetical answer, I'm not going to lay out the details of my sexual preferences here. But if I were trying not to go too far down into the onion with this one, but I was going to say something that was true, I would say something like, well, you know, I think that it really kind of depends on the quality of the intimacy I have with a partner. If I feel really close to them, I mean, I'm a girl, so, you know, a lot of that's going to depend how close I feel to a partner. But if I feel really close to them, you know, it could probably be 2-3 times a week. That doesn't go into all the details of my sexual history and what makes me feel close to a partner and the times I was devastated and that I didn't want to have sex with someone anymore. It's a surface level answer, but it's true. Does it make more sense as I talk about this? Okay, so somebody provided a question. Shireen says, if we were to become life partners, how do you see us share expenses and financial resources? Okay, you know, people fight about money a lot. So, you know, that's a great question. In my ideal partnership, I'm somewhat flexible about this. You know, if we really had the same ideas about money, I'd be okay just throwing it all in and having a joint account. If we had extremely different views of money, it might make more sense to have yours, mine, and ours account where we don't have any accountability about how we spend the money that we agree is each individual's money. So it's kind of, you know, I'm kind of flexible about it. I do think that equity is really important. If one of us makes vastly more money than the other, it probably makes more sense for that person to contribute more to shared expenses. That's a true answer. Doesn't get into my personal history with money, doesn't get into how my parents treated money, doesn't get into people I've dated who were cheap, doesn't get into any of that. It's just a surface level answer. That is true. And that allows the other person to assess whether they are okay with that answer. You do want to tell enough of the truth that if this is going to be a deal breaker, look, just like you want to reject somebody right out the gate when the stakes are low, I encourage you to say enough to get rejected right out the gate when the stakes are low. Because let me tell you, if it's a deal breaker for them, eventually the deal will be broken. Do you want that to happen now or after you're deeply in love? I hope the answer is now. Any other questions that people have that, you know, they've been kind of hinky to ask, but and you don't even have to phrase it eloquently. You can just be very blunt with me. Like if you were dating somebody who asked you a really blunt question that just totally threw you off, that you would be like, whoa, I don't know how to answer that. What's the question that you're scared of answering if somebody asked it? Or it doesn't have to be you. I've met people who say, you know, I've been divorced numerous times. I don't know how to, if somebody says, you know, how many times have you been married? I'm terrified to give the answer to that question. Here's another question that some people will ask. So how many sexual partners have you had? I'm going to give you an answer to that one. You know, that's not something I ask, and it's not really something I answer. I don't think it's particularly important. I will say I'm not a virgin. But that's not something that's going to be important to me in this relationship. If it's very important to you, you need to make a decision about that. Okay, Sarah says, I have a hard time coming up with questions because I tend to have a high degree of disclosure early on with people. So most high disclosure people, and I was one for a really long time, most high disclosure people have an anxious attachment style. And the upside of that is you get a lot of information. The downside is that secure attachers don't often really connect with that. The people who really connect with it are the people that you should not be with. Statistically, you should not be with somebody avoidant. Again, I encourage you to watch the webinar on this. It's a disaster, but those people are really attracted to, avoidant people and are really attracted to that style of communication early on, because they tend to be quite comfortable disclosing a lot for about 30 to 60 days, and then not after that. Then it feels it feels threatening. And a lot of anxious attachers then get really, really, really hurt. So yeah, interesting time window. Yeah. So I would encourage you to just, any of you who share that in common with me, start thinking about questions that you might ask or answer in terms of the layer of the onion analogy. And we are out of time. I thank you so much for your attention today. And I hope I left you wanting to know even more. We've got a bunch of webinars already posted with ACC. And so I hope that those are helpful for you. And I thank you so much for your attention today. Oh, and to contact me, you can see like free chapters of my books, how to get in touch with me, all that stuff at lovefactually.co. It's not .com, it's .co. And so lovefactually.co. And the final thing I'm going to say today is, what do you do if you find a deal breaker? Break the deal, do it now. Don't kid yourself and get in deep. What did I do with the guy who carried a gun everywhere? Right then, in that moment, I said to him, "Ah, damn it." And he said, "What? Is that a deal breaker?" And I said, "Well, you know, it really is." And he goes, "Well, I wouldn't have to carry one when I was with you." And I said, it's not even that. It's our thinking on that is so disparate. I just can't handle it. And he then tried to argue why his view was right, mine was wrong. And I said, "Look, you could be right about all of it, but I can't handle this. That's the point. I can't do it. I really thank you for your time, but I can't handle it. I like you a bunch, and I wish you well on your search. I wish that we were just alike on that, but we're not. I'm not saying you're wrong. Could be me." And then we got off the phone, and I feel like he has goodwill toward me. I definitely have it toward him. And you know, nobody got really hurt. So if you find the deal breaker, break the deal. Thank you, everyone who attended, and thanks for all the kudos. That's really nice to hear.
Thank you so much, Duana. As usual, really informative, done in a way that's really interesting too. Really appreciate it. So I put in the link again to our upcoming series, upcoming webinars in this series. And also we have another series, a Cinema of Conflict and Transformation. Please take a look at those, and we hope to see you soon. Leila, do you want to say something about the question, how to view this recording?
Yes, so it takes a little while for me to transcribe or add subtitles to the recordings, but eventually it will be posted on our website, not directly at the link that Shireen sent, but we also have a YouTube channel for the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies. It's posted in both spots. If you want up-to-the-minute updates about when new content is posted to YouTube and the center, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'll give you that alert. But I can also send out the recording to those who registered, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Our next webinar is on February 24. It's the presenter is Jessica Fern, and the topic is polysecure attachment, trauma, and consensual non-monogamy. So we'll see you there. Have a great rest of your week.